Well, this recording is with Mr. Alan Street, and the date is the 2nd of February, 1965, and we're making this conversation for the Living Legend Library of Oklahoma Christian College here at Mr. Street's place of business. Morning, Mr. Street.
Good morning to you.
And we had a preliminary discussion prior to turning on this piece of equipment. And I'd like to find out, for the record, are you a native of Oklahoma City?
No, I'm not, Mr. Dawson. Sorry, we moved here in 1891, December 22nd.
And from where, sir?
From Texas, from Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas. What motivated your family to move here?
Well, they went broke in Dallas, and he had a chance to get the appointment in charge of, when my father did, of an Indian school down at Stonewall. And he stayed there for a year, and then came up here and got into the furniture and second-hand business.
Uh-huh.
Tried to make a living.
Well, were you born at the time, or what?
Oh, yeah, I was 5 years old.
You were 5 years old
yeah.
at the time, yeah. So you started almost close to the beginning of Oklahoma City.
Right, yeah.
What was your first impression as you started to grow up?
Well, of course, when we first come here, the town was bounded on the north by 7th Street and on the west by Walker,
mm-hmm.
and on the south by what is now the Fiscal Railroad track.
Mm-hmm.
That was the limit of the town. And then, of course, during the Spanish-American War, I sold newspapers, the Dallas News and the Wichita Eagle. The Oklahoman did not have, at that time, the Associated Press Wires, and those two papers. One of them came in at 4 o'clock. The Dallas News came in on the Santa Fe at 4 o'clock. The Wichita Eagle came in on the Rock Island at 2 o'clock. Oklahoma City made up then of Kansas and Texas people.
Uh-huh.
And, of course, they had all the news. Now, the Texas people wouldn't read the Kansas paper. They'd wait till 4 o'clock to get the Dallas News. And then Wichita Eagle, of course, came in at 2 o'clock for the Kansas people. And that was, of course, my first experience to mount anything on the outside into the city of itself.
It wasn't a very big city at that time.
No, we didn't have many people here then, of course. I presume they had about, I think, 3,000 and 4,000 people maybe.
Well, at least it was a start.
Yeah.
Quite a contrast to today, isn't it?
Indeed it is, Mr. Doyle.
You went to school here?
Oh, yes, I went to Emerson School, and then that was located out on 1905. Emerson School was located out at 6th and Walker. It's a big school there now. And I went on across over to Irving School, which was a high school. It was on Walnut between 4th and 5th. And the girl I married, we went to school together, graduated in.
Now, who did you marry?
I married Emma McElhaney. And she was in the school over there at the Irving School, where we both graduated from high school in the same class. Still got her.
Were they McElhaney? They had already moved here at the time.
No, she was living here with her sister. She lived in her home was in Baxter Springs, Kansas, but she came down here to go to school and lived with her sister on 10th Street here.
Who were some of your school chums? Do you recall?
Well, I had some named Everett Goff, Gene Alford, and Hugh McCready, Gene Knox, and Nellie Perry was a girl that lived at that time.
Are some of them still with us?
Some of them are still living, yes, sir. But they're scattered. There are not many of them here anymore, that I know of, in Oklahoma City. Yeah. There's a boy named Clarence Parsons who's quite active up here in the American Legion. He's still here, and he was Won the school board back there in the early days.
I imagine life was rather hectic back in those days.
Oh, yes, we didn't have a whole lot to do. We rode ponies instead of an automobile. Didn't have automobiles then. And then there wasn't a whole lot that boys could do. We all kept a cow at our house and did their own.
Kept them right in the backyard, huh?
Yeah, we had a barn back there. You know, we had the horses, kept the horse and your cows in your barn. You didn't have any automobiles, as I said a while ago. So I used to tell them as I was 21 years old before I knew you could buy milk. Cow.
As we go along chronologically, what were you doing at the time you got married?
Well, I was working for Street and Draper Funeral Home down on Main Street.
Street and Draper?
Street and Harper was then, excuse me, Mr. Doyle.
Where'd that name Street come from? Your name or the
Yeah.
family name?
Yeah, it's my father's name and my name, and Street is the name we've known all our lives.
What I'm trying to do is to place it in relation. Now, your father, when you moved here, he got in the furniture business and so forth, and then from there, he stepped into
funeral
service business. And naturally, you followed right in his footsteps.
Yeah, that's
And when did you get interested in politics?
Well, I got interested in politics. It must have been 45 years ago. I was a precinct, had charge of a precinct, and precinct inspector where the people voted. See, we had a franchise election come up, and somebody came to see me about paying me to get the vote in their favor. Well, I got the idea if it's time to buy me, they'd time to buy some other people. So I got into politics and got elected Democratic county chairman, secretary. I was first elected secretary, and then I got elected county chairman. And I got two people on the election board then. One of them was named Paul Pope as secretary, and Levin Dish as chairman. He was a preacher. Big, square-jawed preacher. And we cleaned up the election machinery. We didn't vote the dead people in the cemetery anymore and things like that, and got cleaned up.
Didn't buy the votes anymore?
Huh? No.
Didn't buy the votes?
No, I didn't buy folks. And we got from there, and then I went to the legislature and was there for 10 years.
When did you go into the legislature, you recall?
Well, I'm going to stop for just a minute. 1909, I think, was the first time.
Who was governor at the time?
The governor at the time was J.B.A. Roberts. No, yeah, J.B.A. Roberts. No, Governor Williams.
And you were...
No, it was not. Let me get this thing straight. I don't believe it was Governor Williams. I believe it was J.B.A. Robertson. I'm not sure about the date.
And you represented what district?
The 3rd district. That district at the same time was out here in the northwest part of the city. We lived out on 36th Street.
That was out in the country then, wasn't it?
Part of it was almost, yes. The district is...
And you stayed in the legislature for how long?
Well, I didn't go for the... I stayed in the legislature altogether 10 years. I was in there 5 different 2-year terms. In other words, I was in there in 1919 when I first went. I'll get it back.
1919.
Yeah, and then was in there in 23 and 27 and 29. I was in there when they impeached Jack Walton. And I was in there when they tried to impeach Henry Johnson. No, I was in there when they did impeach Henry Johnson, of course. And then they tried to impeach Governor Robertson one time, but they didn't impeach him at fair.
Can you recall any other really exciting activities in the legislature during your tenure?
Well, of course, those impeachments was really exciting, especially during the Jack Walton days.
Right.
And then we used to have some breakouts once in a while in the legislature. Some of the people would want to fight a little bit. We had some interruptions on that account once or twice.
Was there any, you recall any important legislation or laws that were put on the statute?
Well, I'll have to stop it. I should, because there'd rather been some.
Those were the days when really the state was in its childhood.
Yeah.
What did the Capitol look like at that time?
Well, the Capitol, of course, was just like this here. I mean, during that part of time, they built the Capitol a little earlier than that. And, of course, at one time, the Capitol, a part of it was down there on the 9th and 10th floor of the building that's 2nd and Broadway. That building that's the northwest corner, 2nd and Broadway. And then they built the Capitol building. They had quite to do about building the Capitol building without a dome. Lots of people didn't like it. But it was built during Governor Williams' days. He appointed a commission. And then that land out there, there was 20 acres given off of Mr. Hornsack, which is west of the Capitol, and 20 acres given off the east side, which was Culberson's 106 acres. And that 40 acres was given there for the Capitol building, and those other buildings that connected around in it. And then there was a lot of, we voted on locating the Capitol. Shawnee and Gus in Oklahoma City.
Right.
And Oklahoma City won out. And then Governor Haskell moved the Capitol down to Oklahoma City.
From Guthrie.
From Guthrie. He brought the seal down here. And Mr. Anthony, who was his secretary, brought the seal down to Huckins Hotel, Lee Huckins Hotel, they called it those days. That's one night.
That was a very historic time during that transfer, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, yeah, it was. Yeah. Nobody else but Governor Haskell probably would have moved it. People thought it wasn't going to take effect, until later on. That's what we got in statehood.
Can you recall in the controversy on the building of the Capitol and why they never put a dome on the Capitol?
Well, Governor Williams said it wasn't necessary. It wouldn't be used for, it couldn't be used for anything, and there's no use of spending that money for something that would be no use for as far as the people occupying the building. Just be for looks, it'd be all.
Just merely decoration.
Yeah, and he wouldn't let them do it.
And it's still not on there.
Still not on now, that's right. Okay.
Following that, then did you get into city activities?
Yeah, they came to me, some people did one day, and wanted me, I thought I was through with politics after I got out of the legislature, and said that they needed somebody to run for my ward. Now, the man was going to run, but they didn't want to support.
What ward was that?
That was Ward 1. So I said I was through with politics, and my wife was through with it too. But to make a long story short, there was about 10 men in this committee. One of them called up my wife and
Who was that, do you know?
That caller?
Yeah.
Well, no, I can't say. I know what the meeting was. I know some of the men in there. But anyway, they got her consent for me to run for councilman from the first ward, which I did.
What year was that?
Well, now we got to stop and figure. Let's see, 18, that's 22 years ago. Can you remember that far back? 22, and this is 65. That would be about 19...
22 and 65, that'd be 43 years ago.
No, I mean it was 1943.
Oh, it was 1943.
That's right. And then I served on the council for 4 years, and then was elected mayor for 12 years. Judge Hefner was mayor when I served on the council, and I succeeded him.
Well, now you went into the council
in 43 and served for 47.
47.
And then I was elected mayor in 47 and served 12 years.
Right.
47 and 12 would be 59 when I went out as mayor, I guess. Wasn't it?
Well, that's quite a long tenure as mayor.
That's the longest anybody's ever been mayor of Oklahoma City.
Well, is it still a 4-year term?
Yes, sir.
And under still the same setup as today?
They have today. I have the manager, form of government.
Who was city manager then?
Well, Harry Bailey was city manager.
When you first went in as mayor?
No, when I first went in as councilman, yeah.
In the council?
Yeah.
Do you remember your fellow councilmen at that time? You were from Ward 1.
Yeah.
Were they district the same as they are now?
Yes, sir.
1, 2, 3, 4. 4 wards.
Yes, sir.
Who was in Ward 2?
Ward 2 was Percy Jones and Charlie Litton. And Ward 3 was Leonard Dickerson and Camel. And Ward 4 was Coxey Stark and Harlow Gears.
Well, you had another constable in your ward then, didn't you?
Sir? And the councilman in my ward was, I'm trying to think of his name now. He's dead, been dead a good many years. I can see him now, and I can see him when I can't call his name now.
Yeah, it'll come back to you probably.
Yeah.
Short.
Oh, yes, you'll be gone 2 minutes now. I'll remember that name.
I imagine
Judge Hefner was mayor.
Judge Hefner was mayor.
Yeah.
I imagine those council meetings were rather fiery at times, weren't they?
Oh, yes, we always had some arguments, just like they have now. Disagreements, same.
What were some of the major activities of the council, if you recall them, the council of mayor when you went in?
Well, of course, we had the question of enlarging the city, taking in more ground and more territories, and that's still been, as you probably know, they've kept taking it in all the time. They had the three words to take it in that time to protect it, to keep them setting up a little town in different parts of the county, like the village and like Nichols Hill, of course, is outside the city. But some of those places they tried to take in more territory. In other words, they keep them setting up like, little town.
Was the village in existence at that time? And
no, the village wasn't, but Nichols Hills.
Nichols Hills. What else? Did they have any other surrounding
yeah, they had
communities?
Oh, yes, they had Beston and War Acres, of course. And, yeah, I'm sure the village was in there at that time, yeah. And then, of course, on the other side, right after that, they got, during that time, they got Midwest City and Dell City out there. And they finally got up after they surrounded by three sides you could come into the city by the quest. And some people brought that territory into city limits because they thought they'd get fire protection and police protection now for being in the city.
Was there as much opposition as there apparently is today at some times to annexation?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that sack of ground right south of Twin Hills Golf Course. We tried to bring that in, and they had a lot of controversy about that. And they got it incorporated before we got them in.
Why did, refresh my memory, why did you run for mayor?
Well, I'll tell you, there was an individual that was going to run for mayor. Some of them didn't like him particularly, and then I'd started some things while I was on the council that I wanted to see carried through. And these same people got after me to go for mayor.
Yeah.
Because they didn't like particular Southern man. Well, I finally said I'll go for one term. And I went for one term. And then it was the man that ran against me in the primary withdrew. I didn't have any opposition.
Who was that, you recall?
No. I called the next two times.
What did you want to accomplish? What were the thoughts you had in mind?
Well, we had some parks that we had to do that we were trying to get located, and we were trying to condemn some land from it to do it, and then we was building Lake Hefner turned out to be after that, and we were trying to get a water supply from down there at Toka, different things that came a little later, and I was trying to help some of the poor people, the fellows who was underprivileged people. Now, to give you one of the nicest compliment I think I had when I was mayor, we was going to condemn some land down here by the Frisco Railroad track for Negro Park. And there's an old Negro mammy came up to see me one day, and she says, "My old man's homesick, Mr. Mayor, and he says for me to tell you that, and they're going to condemn our house down there with 2 free lots on the city park." And she said, he come up and told me to tell you that whatever you said, it was worth for us to take. He said you'd be fair with it and you wouldn't cheat us. And I thought that was the nicest compliment I had while I was mayor, maybe. They had an old couple that didn't know me, and I didn't know them particularly. And she didn't know we were elected. And so there's some things that we could do by acquaintance and by old-time friends that some of the others could do maybe, but they couldn't do as easy as some as we did. Just like out here, we wanted to pave, the people wanted to pave Indiana. Shepherd owned his farm on this side, you know where that was, of course. And he couldn't pave it. He wouldn't sign up. The other people on the other side wanted it. Well, I knew Clyde a long time. I went out there and finally got him to agree to sign up, and we got the street paved in the first street west of Shepherd, where Shepherd Mall is now. And some little things like that. And then the city was growing, and we wanted to see it grow and be a part of it. And of course, most anybody could talk to me, and a lot of people I've grown up with, you know, that I knew. And there wasn't anything out of it that I wasn't trying to gain any financial gain. I made $1,000 a year But my salary, it's raised a little bit now to $2,500. So, and then you get in once, next year the same fellow ran against me, and we beat him again. In fact, he ran 3 times. He did not. Don't need to mention him.
Who was that?
That was Waller Harrison.
Waller Harrison.
You remember Waller?
Yes.
Yeah, Waller was very anxious to be mayor.
He was on the council also, wasn't he?
Yeah, he beat Bill Kane for the council. Yeah, he was on the council at one time while I was mayor. And Waller was smart. And a lot of ways, but he was too smart for some people. You know, a lot of people come before the council, and they're not as smart as you or me or he might be, and they've never spoken out in public much, and they're hard to explain what they got to say and take time to get it over. Well, Waller had a figure mind, you know, and he was way ahead of the fellow a lot of times. But he wouldn't wait maybe for the fellow to interrupt things like that, you know. And you
sort of anticipate what he was going to say.
Well, yes, and you could too, and most everybody, but you've got to be respectful to that humble citizen and let him say it his own way, you know. And we'd have some trouble a lot of times with Waller because and you say anticipate what the man said before. But he was a good councilman. And
I imagine you had a lot of experiences, particularly as mayor in a young city like that.
Yeah, we did have to. And then, of course, the mayor had a little more power than they got now. The mayor should have more power than they have now. Now, of course, in my days, I appoint all my committees. The council didn't have to confirm them. Mm-hmm. I'd usually talk to the councilman, like, I don't want to appoint this fellow out there at Channel 5 off on a committee, and he lives in your ward, Tom. And if Tom didn't agree to it, well, I'd try to reason with him. 9 times out of 10, he said, that's all right with me, Alan. What are you going to do? And, of course, you'd get some difficulties on trying to make some appointments. I remember one time I talked to a fellow from the 2nd Ward. Dr. Ware was on the council, and he goes and talks to a lady out there, and Mrs. Woodward, fine woman, about taking the job. Never come to me before you went to see her. Well, she had quite a little property out there in the 2nd Ward. It was on the Planning Commission, and I knew that she'd been before the Planning Commission a good many times with a selfish interest, which was perfectly all right. A lot of people came before the council with selfish interests, you know.
Yeah.
People who didn't have any just let you go and thought it was all right. Well, of course, I couldn't appoint her. I couldn't take the chance. So I had to tell him I couldn't appoint her. And he wondered what he was going to do, what I've already told him. I said, well, you just blame me. And I'd phone and tell her that I was going to appoint. They had lots of niggers in the 2nd Ward, and I thought on that board it'd be all right to appoint a nigger to that, which I didn't. But anyway, he had to go tell her, which made embarrassing for him and very embarrassing for me. But now the mayor can't do that, so the council got to confirm him, and he put 9 times out of 10 he has to appoint the one they want. And as I say, most time you don't have to worry about it. And there's some things. And then we tried to meet with the council, some of the people beforehand if I had some problem like that, you know, and different things, and find it out, and you get along better, and they don't broadcast inside. Controversy. But it finally gets tiresome, of course. As I say, too long for me and too long for the public.
Well, you obviously enjoyed it when you were married.
Yeah, I did. Because I say I like to have somebody that can't help themselves sometimes. And then I tried to keep the minority party in their place. Tried to help them. That was the nigger party, but tried to help them, but also tried to make them realize all the time there's a minority group that had to stay in their line. No, I never did. I don't suppose there ever any kind of a nigger gathering that amounted to anything that I didn't go over and say a word of welcome to, just like I would with the white people. And the nigger paper came out with an editorial one time, giving me a word of praise, because they'd thought, you know, that I was born and raised in the South, that I'd be against them on every picture. I wasn't against them, but I didn't think I thought then, just like I think now, I don't think they ought to run the whole show. They're about to take it over now, so I didn't think they ought to ask too much. We got along fine with them.
Well, actually, do you feel that there's been, or don't you feel, let's put it this way, how you feel the Negro question has been handled here in Oklahoma City? Don't you think it's been
very well?
Very well?
Yeah, nice. For instance, I was down there and we put niggas on the fire department, on the police department. And we've seen them beforehand, you know, and got some good men on that. It's been handled very well. And then it was quite a touchy problem when I went down there between the whites and the niggers. In other words, the niggers would rent the basement of the auditorium, for an example, to put on one of the dances. And some of these white people would go down there just to see them and laugh at them. Well, they had no business there, you know. It was only exclusive for the niggers, and we finally had to stop that. And then out there, they'd go out here to make a eating place and get in. So we had some trouble with the whites as much as we did with the niggers. We had the auditorium. It was open at that time. It was open for the public. As far as the interdenominational, I mean, it wasn't open. When a show came there, we'd have a block of seats for the niggers, so you'd save a block. Well, they'd want to, like the grand operas and things, they'd want maybe other seats, but so many people came from Wichita Falls and other places, they didn't want to come in and buy tickets. Well, they had no business there, you know. It was only exclusive for the niggers, and we finally had to stop that. And then out there, they'd go out here to make a eating place and get in. So we had some trouble with the whites as much as we did with the niggers. We had the auditorium. It was open at that time. It was open for the public. As far as the interdenominational, I mean, it wasn't open. When a show came there, we'd have a block of seats for the niggers, so you'd save a block. Well, they'd want to, like the grand operas and things, they'd want maybe other seats, but so many people came from Wichita Falls and other places, they didn't want to come in and buy tickets, and they would be right next to them, right the block. Well, anyway, they finally sent a committee to me to see this interdenominational, the group that has the niggers and whites together. What is that group?
Integration.
Well, that's integration, but this is. But anyway, Dr. Home from the Congregational from the
NAACP.
huh?
The NAACP.
No, it's the other one yet, where the whites and the niggers are together, and Jess Owens was emeritus head of it. Well, anyway, these three people, Professor Moon and McFerrin and Dr. Holmes. First guy Owens came to see me. He'd been president of this, Jess Owens had been president of this organization and wanted to open up everything for the niggers, see. And Jess Owens came to see me, and finally we talked a little bit. I said, Jess, you got a daughter classing at me, lovely daughter. Yes, yeah, well, I said, she's got a swimming pool there, how would you like that for? A lot of these big niggers is nothing but a rich sap around them, go in swimming with your daughter there. Well, he said, that's a different thing. Oh, of course, it's the same thing. Well, anyway, these three preachers came to see me about opening up everything. And I asked Dr. McFerrin, of course, I contended all the time that we had to take it just gradual, see. That we had to put these policemen on and these firemen and take all this stuff gradual, see, was my contention. So Dr. McFerrin and Professor Holmes, and I told Jess Owens he was just he was an advanced agent for somebody that was going to come see me the next day, these three fellas. And I said to Dr. McFerrin, I said, what's your board done about it up there at the St. Luke's Church, Dr. McFerrin? I said, we're the same kind of folk. You come from the South, and I did. Oh, he said, we haven't taken it up in our board yet up there at all. I knew you hadn't, of course, and got him in the fun. Well, finally I said, now I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll open it up for interdenominational choir. That was that nigger choir they used to sing. And for any religious gathering and any political gathering, we opened up. They can come and sit anywhere they want to. So they said, well, that's pretty good. I said, that's a starter. It won't be long till the whole thing will be opened up. And they said, well, we'll report back to our committee. I said, no, that won't do. There'll have to be two things. You fellows will have to vote yes right here and agree to it. And then we'll have to agree that they're not going to be any publicity. I said, the newspaper man sitting right out there now, we can get all the newspapers going and then get the report. But we won't be any publicity, and we'll just go along on this. And we're still, they can buy tickets. There'll be seats there for the colored just the same. So we went along for 2 years, and then integration came with the Supreme Court, and we opened it all up. And got along fine. And then the governor, of course, he was helped with the integration, open up in Oklahoma, you know.
What governor was that?
Well, this from down at Medill, that ran for Senate last time.
Gary?
Raymond Gary.
Raymond Gary.
And by the way, Raymond Gary was the most helpful governor that we had to Oklahoma City while I was down there. Lloyd Turner was the governor, and so was Bob Carr was the governor when I was there. And Governor Gary helped us get $38 million for all these expressways out there. Now, we got them from the highway department, but Gary would go right in there and sit as chairman of the board, and he was the whole board, you know, how they function. And he helped us with all these expressways and freeways. So I tried to name one of them, the expressways for them and Gary, and we did name 35 out there, and the government said you couldn't do it, you know, and we took it off.
Well, you named it, though.
Yeah, we named it and put a sign up, and the government came along and said you can't do that. And named one for Schweinle, the one south. They couldn't do that. They did,
But they're still known as that, though.
yeah, Lemon Gate Expressway, yeah. But he was very hip for Oklahoma City on building all these expressways at the time we built them. He was good. We'd go out there and see him, and he'd go and say, well, we'll go and see what we can do. And he'd do it. So he was very helpful.
Well, the city's come a long way, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has come a long ways, and of course, the city's never had enough finance to do the job properly. They've always, when I first went down there, the policemen would just get $150 a month.
What's the basis of that, of not having enough finances in the city?
Well, of course, we're not allowed to set up any particular tax without a vote of the citizens, and we weren't allowed even to submit a earning tax, a sales tax, till about 10 years ago. I mean, about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Another thing that I was always proud of that I wanted to always get a retirement fund set up.
For the city employees?
City employees. In other words, they got to be 70 years old, even 72. We said you can't work here after 65. What are they going to do when they know they'd worked there all their lives, had nothing counted? Now, they kicked out some good men that way, and so we finally got it in other words, where now Chief Mack gets half his pay he was getting when we kicked him out. And so do the chief police get half the pay salary they're getting, and a lot of employees getting it. And we got that law, finally got permission from the legislature to put that law into effect. And now we take it, of course, the firemen have always had a good law, because they have an insurance policy that's written in Oklahoma City. Part of that goes to the fireman's pension fund. And they can quit after 20 years. They start at 20 and they're just 40 years old and go out and get another job and still get half the salary they're getting. So we got that into effect, and that's one thing that I feel happy about, that we left that for them. But the city don't have any way. In other words, the city only gets 3 mills, from out of the 15 mills, and that's only about 800,000, 900,000 a year. And the school board gets 7, and the county gets 5 out of the 15 mills. Everywhere it's divided up.
Do you feel that someday the legislature or enough pressure will be put on the legislature that the laws will be changed so the city can enact its own taxes?
Yeah, they can do it without, if they do it without. Now I think this fellow down here, Norman, is going to run partly on that platform, the mayor down there, Norman. Sneed, he's, I think, going to run for governor. And he's been pretty active in this city league, these different municipal leagues, they call it. And he's made 1 or 2 talks about the needs of the money that the city has. And even if they give us the entire 15 mil levy, we wouldn't have enough for it, and then the city would just be about 3 times $800,000. So they'll all need a little more pay. Now my secretary down there that I put in, she's been down there now 20 years. She's getting my same salary she got when.
Who's that?
Mabel Thanks.
Mabel?
Yeah, you know Mabel?
Everyone knows Mabel.
Do you?
Wonderful person.
Well, sir, she was working out here at the Capitol. She worked for Dr. Aiken over there one time, and I went to see him because my water was got out of whack, and she was just, I got impressed with the way she worked around there. And then she was working out at the Capitol, and the Capitol legislature closed, and she came down and asked me for a job. Well, I said, Mabel, I'm not hiring any employees, but I'd like to have you. And Bill Gill was city manager, and I said, I'll go and tell Bill Gill that I'd appreciate it if he'd hire you and assign you to my office. And I said, now I want you, the mayor, Judge Hefner's mayor, secretary, as soon as old Judge leaves, she'd leave. And I said, now Mabel, I want you to know you're going to work with the whole city, not just for me. That's why I want the manager to hire. So, of course, Bill agreed to it readily, and she started to work after me, and it was immense fine help to me, you know. Because you'd come in there and complain about your water department. She wouldn't let you come in to see me. She'd take you down to the water department and introduce you to somebody. Did things like that, you know. They took a lot of the wood off the mayor's shoulder. So she started down there with me.
When? Do you recall what year?
Yeah, it's been, let's see, 12 and 4 is 16, and then 2 more will be 18 years ago.
Well, Mabel has become an institution there.
Oh, she's a German and got German blood in her, and she don't know anything but work. She does more work down there now than any two of those girls did. And she knows lots of it, and then she's got a good disposition. She was not discourteous to anybody. In fact, I've had people, when I was mayor, I've had men come from east or something that's been in to see me and come back and said, we make lots of officers and come in contact people, but said, I've never had one and more nicer than you're the second. I just want you to know that. And she's that way and still that way.
She sure is.
Yeah.
And I know she's been a lot of help to the succeeding mayors that followed you.
Oh, yes. She was a big help to Jimmy and a big help to George. But she might make a little more, but she makes about $300 a month.
Not as much as she should.
No. In other words, they didn't have the money, but she ought to have been in a class because she does more work than just the mayor's secretary. No.
Now, you follow pretty closely everything that goes on. I know you do. What do you think our situation is today? What state are we in as far as the city?
The city?
Yes.
Well, I don't see how the city is going to do some things that ought to be done without getting more money. Of course, now we raised the water rate. We raised the garbage rate. Now, when I was down there, I tried to get them to raise the water rate. I said that's the only thing we have to sell, mostly, besides our service. But Cunningham fought it all the time. He thought if they raised the water rate that people would quit using water. For instance, when I went down there to counseling, for instance, we had 875 people that wasn't paying a nickel for water bill. It was these people in these little grocery stores that would have a sink in the back and maybe a toilet, and they wasn't using 1,000 gallons a month. We had a minimum of 1,000 gallons a month. See, they were using 700, 800 gallons or 900, and they wasn't paying anything. Well, the first motion I made was that they would pay at least the minimum, $1 a month. And then I made a motion that we had some people working for $3 and a half a day, and I made a motion that nobody should work for the city under $5 a day, which seemed now like it was very small, but that helped a lot of people. working, and garbage people and things like that. Now they're getting $10 and $11 a day. But every time we tried to raise the water rate, we did raise it 2 or 3 times, of course. And then we put in that sewer tax, did everything to try to get the money. I got a bill in there now, a water bill now, and that's $15. Used to be about $5, see, for the same period. But that was our biggest revenue producing, was the water department. And we used to lose money on the garbage all the time, you know. We'd charge you $1 for 2 months. You couldn't go to your house 2 or 3 times a week, a couple of times a week, and pick it up for 25 cents.
Do you think we're going to make some progress? We're going to get ahead with some new laws or some?
Well, I think they will eventually. I think, of course, time is all set for an earning tax. I think it's the best tax we could get, but a lot of people want a sales tax. But earning tax is you don't pay unless you make it. And I'm not for exempting these people that live in War Acres if they make their money here, make their living here. Now, we had a man working for us. He's gone now, a good man. And he lived in War Acres. And he's very much against earning tax. Well, I said, Jim, where do you make your salary? In War Acres? Or here, in the city? Well, he said, I make it here, of course, but I live out there. I said, sure you do. You take your money here and go spend it out there. But you don't want anybody to make you pay on your earning tax here, because you live out there. I said, suppose we all moved out there, what are you going to do? And he said, well, maybe I ought to pay something, because I got my job here in the city. I said, sure, if we don't make it, you don't have a job. So there's just a lot of people that ought to pay that get their money in the city of Oklahoma City if they get their salary here. And lots of people move out in these suburban places on account of they can get more ground, it's cheaper, they could buy a house on an installment plan and things like that. We've got lots of people, you know, that live outside the city of Oklahoma City. But now I thought that earning tax was the easiest tax to collect. The government would cooperate with us on what they paid, and we fought with Labor. Labor fought us out there at the legislature for 10 years. You could go out there and they'd be sitting up in the gallery of the legislature when the labor element, they fought any kind of tax. They'll fight this sales tax right here today. And I tried to argue with them now, for instance, we had an earning tax first started out with just 0.5%. That would be cheaper than raising the water rate for them, and it would have been. Now they raised the water rate, and in other words, and Labor wanted a $3,000 exemption before you start that earning tax. And they'll vote against it again, the sales tax. People won't vote harder to put tax on themselves.
So you feel that eventually we will have to increase our taxes?
Oh, I do too, to do the things you ought to do. In other words, we vote bond issues, but we don't vote maintenance bond issues, see? We vote bond issues for more parks and more extension and all that, but we don't vote anything and every time we vote those, it takes more help. It's like the parks, for an example. We vote more parks, and by land, and it takes more help to operate them and keep them going. And just like they voted the bond issues yesterday, it'll take more to operate the courthouse if it gets bigger. If they're going to extend it, take more maybe to work on these roads. It's going to cost money to maintain. And you see, you can't take that out of your bond issue.
It has to be a separate fund.
Yeah, sure. The city got to take it out of the general fund. All help. And they've got about 3,000 employees. When I was down there, we first started with 1,100 when I first went there. I don't suppose I had over 2,100 when I left as mayor.
Well, growth is a factor that can't be deterred. We're still growing and always will.
And it takes more help to do it, yeah. And then, of course, they get some people that shouldn't be on the payroll. Now, I never got a person appointed while I went down there. I believe that the head department should hire the help. And now they charge one or two. Bailey used to have a book, that big book like that, and you'd open it up and he'd say, well, all those years recommended John Smith and Dr. Saw. Between the two of them, they had over 1,100 charged to their name. And I saw the book one day, took it home. He had a big fat gal that kept it and took it home one day. And he had 3 or 4 charged to me, and I remember the instance on those because he'd come in and he said, do you know Tom Egan? I said, yes. What kind of fellow? I said, I always liked him very much. Thought he was a nice fellow. Well, he'd put Tom Egan to work and charge it to me like I had got him his job, you know. But a lot of people now they didn't find. I never fixed the ticket, never got an employer job because I didn't think it was my duty to do that. The only ticket I ever fixed was one for, I didn't fix it though. I asked this preacher up here, who was living then at 10th and Robertson Christian Church preacher, Bill Alexander. I was down at Chamber of Commerce with him one day, and I said, are you going back up to your office? And he said, yes. And I said, I'd like to ride with you. I want to go back up there for 2 o'clock service. He said, all right, come on, I may have a ticket. Well, when we got on there in car park, sure enough, he did have a ticket. He gave it to me to fix it. And I got back and gave it to Mabel. I said, here's $1, go fix this ticket for Bill Alexander, the preacher. Well, see, you know, that was the funniest thing. They call that a human interest story, I guess. I got clippings from fellas that are known over the United States. I guess I must have got 6 or 8 clippings. They done that story, of course, and the newspaper boy here told the story about it. They run that story in papers throughout several places outside in the United States. It's a human interest story. And I said to this boy that covered the city hall, then Johnson, I believe it is, said, why would they run anything as that silly? He said, that's what we call a human interest story, Alan. He said, they're harder to get than any other kind of story, and said they're read by more people than any other kind of story. And he said that was what we call a human interest story. But there are a lot of things like that got along. They gave a fella a ticket one day. He left his car running out there by the post office, went in and mailed all his stuff, came back, and the ticket. And so he looked me, and I knew he made $50,000 a year the year before. He looked me at a letter and enclosed that ticket. Told me what a good friend of mine, how he'd been, and how long he'd been, and how he voted for me, and all that. Well, I just gave Mabel $1, and I said, take this letter and this ticket. And I said, dear Bob, it's true you've been a friend of mine a long time. It's true, I'm sure that you voted for me. You voted for me because you wanted me to come down here and do the best job I could and try to go by the law. And I said, I can't fix the ticket just because I'm down here no more than you can out there. And close your part of the seat for $1 for your ticket. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, something like that. Well, maybe I made a mistake, but I had a better satisfaction. In other words, the fellow I was not trying to sign not to fool was the fellow that I slept with every night. The fellow, when I went home, laid down, that I could say, well, my books are clear down there, see. Now, some people didn't do it. People come see them, and they want a job. We give them to them about supporting them, and they try to get them a job. Like they do, some of them do now, maybe. But it's an interesting experience, and an enjoyable experience in some ways. If you don't try to get something for yourself and something for others, you'll have a better success at it. You can't be 100% all the time, and you've got to let the other fellow have his way some of the time. You can't have your way all the time. You got to give and take. But
you and your contemporaries had a lot accomplished in those 12 years.
Sir?
You and your contemporaries had a lot accomplished in those 12 years.
Well, we hope so. Now, there's some things that we didn't like, just like down here at Atoka. They paid that. Those people held us up down there at Atoka from the beginning on the land. The land was worth $10 an acre, and they got together, charged us $25 and $40 an acre, and different things like that. And we never did do with. We should have sat down on those Atoka people from the start, but we didn't. They still having trouble with them, as you noticed. Still having trouble, and they got a lawyer, and then that was home folks, you know, and the judge was home folks. He was elected for them. They go to his court, he's ruling in their favor. And when we had this waterworks out here at Lake Hefner, getting all that land, the city lawyer would make the jury believe like that. In other words, if we were condemning that land for $100 an acre and they wanted $150, he'd say, well, this land, this comes out of your pocket. The taxpayers are suing the city. It's not just the city who come. And he can make them believe that they would spend it all, costing them all, and we wouldn't get hurt with it. But down there it was different. It was the other side of the picture. I don't know why I was that alone talking like this, because to you it wasn't anything that anybody else wouldn't have done, and some of them could do better. You know, after I was down there for 6 months, I had my heart attack. Went out to Phoenix. So they, first old fellas here, got busy, and a couple maybe, sent me telegrams about London again. It was, I think, the same telegram, but they just signed different fellas' names to it. Well, I didn't want to go again, but I didn't think I should. And they finally sent my heart doctor out there. He flew out there. And we went and had a cardiograph made, and he sat down that night and talked to my wife and I. And I told him I went out there in February, January, it stayed 2 months. He said, I think you'd be better off doing something than you were sitting around home nursing your heart attack. If you just take care of yourself and don't do too much. And since that, then I came back here just 6 days for the primary. And ran against Waller and beat him, and he withdrew in the general election. And since that day, I've gone home every afternoon at 4 o'clock when I've been in town and go to bed. Unless that heart condition. And I'm still here, thank goodness. And that's been 12. That's been
12 years ago.
8 years, yeah, about 12. 14 years ago. So I thought I was going to quit. Then, I had.
Well, this town is full of a lot of people who haven't quit, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there are a lot of people. You take this fella Gaylord up here. Now, there's a fella that paper supported me for council and for the mayor board. And he never did call me one time while I was mayor or while I was on the council and asked me to vote on any one proposition. And the only time I called him one time, we had a dairy ordinance, and he and Ken Hayes was in the dairy business. I mean, had these nice cattle and soul milk, and this thing was coming up, and I wanted to get some information just like it. So I wanted information about the television, something I might call you. Try to get something that I didn't know, which I didn't. And that's the only time I ever talked to E.K. Gaylord while I was down there. I might have talked to him, see him on the Chamber of Commerce on the seat, but he never called me once and said, vote this way, vote that way. And I didn't call him for a vote. In other words, Tracy Jones one time was on the council, and I was trying to get these one-way seats in. And he leaned over to me and says, how shall I vote, Alan? Good friend of mine. And I said, Tracy, just vote how your conscience dictates to you, regardless of me or anybody else. Well, he said, I hadn't thought of it that way, so that's a good thing to do. In other words, I didn't want him to go out and say, well, Allen Street wanted these one-way streets. And you'd be surprised the people who fought them, too.
I can imagine.
This fellow down here, he's dead now, but Joe Morris down at this insurance company, 6th and Lawson. He come to me and he said, Allen, you surely don't want one-way streets. What are you going to do about funerals? They can't go out of Lawson. See, we had Lawson and Harvey and Hudson and Walker and some others. Well, I said, Joe, they can go the other way. There'll be another one. Well, he just fought it up one side and down the other. And we finally didn't make, we had some East and West Street. We finally didn't make 6th Street. The result of his fight, one. 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 And some others. Well, I said, Joe, they can go the other way. There'll be another one. Well, he just fought it up one side and down the other. And we finally didn't make, we had some East and West Street. We finally didn't make 6th Street. The result of his fight, one way, they agreed to widen it 10 feet on each side. And that's how he fought it. And a poor fellow named Adams, who had the furniture store down there, 2nd and Hudson, he was going to make that northeast west corner, 2nd and Hudson. Marvin Adams, he's dead now. He called me up and asked me to come see him, and I did. And I thought he was going in his take about making Hudson. I said, Marvin, you can park on both sides of your street here, and you won't have any trouble. and went on to tell him about how helpful it had been, it would, how many cities had it, and how it moved traffic and so forth. And he never did give in. He died with it on his heart. So there's just a lot of things that way. In other words, they'd make claims. And I personally went clear up Harvey and I went up to as far as 13th Street, just went in one place and the other, trying to check what they do and what they say. And there's a lot of people that wasn't against them, you know. They didn't come down there and say they're for them or anything like that. The people who was against is the one you heard from, you see.
Right.
And they didn't. So you lose those friends sometimes, I guess. Temporary friends, maybe. Or maybe they're not friends that are real friends at all. But that's Marvin Adams. Made like he was an awful good friend, and I thought he was. We belonged to Schweinle together and everything. But he just broke his heart to make Hudson a one way. We should have had more, and should have more today. And the fellow down on Grand Avenue then it was, old Andy Anderson, he just liked to have two hickeys about making Grand Avenue one way. So as I say, sometimes you step on your friend's toes if you try to do what you think is right. And sometimes, on the other hand, you help somebody.